Well, it is the start of a new year, and as the CNBC TV 18 poll has showed, people believe that 2013 is going to be a better year for the Indian economy and that we've bottomed out in 2012. Joining us now to take us through their outlook for 2013 are the Godrej President of the Confederation of Indian Industry and Chris Chmn, President Designate of the CII. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV 18, and we wish you the very best of luck for 2013 and a Happy New Year. But Mr. Godrej, let me start by asking you, and before I talk to you about the economy, let me ask you about what's happening on the acquisition front, because you've closed another acquisition. Godrej Consumer did an acquisition yesterday through your wholly owned subsidiary in the UK, picking up the fourth largest brand in the feminine deodorant space. I know you haven't disclosed the deal size yet, but are we given to understand that acquisitions will be the preferred strategy for growth of the group in 2013 as well?
No, we are growing very strongly organically too, but clearly our objective to have a 10 by 10 strategy, which means grow 10 times in 10 years, would need acquisitions, because that's a CAGR of about 26%. It will be difficult in many of our businesses to organically grow at that rate. So we are looking at acquisitions, especially in Godrej Consumer Products. And this acquisition is in, as you rightly put it, Keyline Brands, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of Godrej Consumer Products. And we have been able to make this acquisition at a very reasonable cost, and I think it will be extremely accretive and strategically very important for Keyline Brands and Godrej Consumer Products.
Mr. Godrej, you talked about this being EPS accretive. Will it be EPS accretive right at the start? And I also understand that this has been funded through low-cost debt. Will the strategy in terms of acquisitions be funding through low-cost debt? And how would you like to fund your future acquisitions as well?
Yes, it will be extremely accretive. We expect it to be accretive from day one.
Okay. Is 2013 going to be a big year for inorganic growth, Mr. Godrej, for you?
Well, we have already announced several acquisitions which will go forward during 2013. We have announced a major acquisition in Africa, which is the Darling Group. We have completed phase 1, completed part of phase 2, and we will have to complete phase 3 in about a year's time. So it will be a continuing acquisition. The deal is done and we have to implement it over a period of time.
All right, good luck with that, sir. I'll come back to you, but Chris Chmn, over to you. Let me talk to you about the external environment and what's happening in the US. The fiscal cliff, in a sense, has been averted in the US for now. We've seen the Senate vote in favor of the fiscal cliff bill, but what is this going to mean as far as the US economy is concerned? Because while we've seen the economy rebound, it's been a very, very gradual pace. What will this mean for the rest of the world, specifically what is happening in the US at this point in time?
First of all, let me start by wishing all the viewers a very happy new year. US is the largest economy in the world, and it had started recovering, and it's very, very important for the global economy that US economy starts to do well. So by averting the fiscal cliff, and if it had happened, there was an expectation that US may go into recession. So by avoiding that, I think it's positive for the global economy. It's positive for the economies of countries like India.
But Chris, what are you hearing from clients at this point in time? And I don't want to talk to you specifically about Infosys because I know that you're in the silent period. Your results are on the 11th. But what is the sense that you're getting from corporate leaders in America about the state of the US economy? How confident are they feeling about the current rebound that we are witnessing in the US economy? And what do they feel about 2013 as the year is kicked off?
See, when I talk to business leaders, they're seeing that economies like China, to some extent India, starting to grow. There is a new leadership in Japan, then of course the situation in the US. So overall they have a slightly positive view of 2013 at this point. Of course Europe will take some time, but even in Europe there is no uncertainty about whether Europe is going to stay together or not. I think there is now clarity that they will continue to stay together. They will have a period of maybe 3 to 5 years of slow growth or nil growth, but overall Europe is going to stay together. So we are entering 2013 with a slightly positive environment. Having said that, I think the uncertainty of what could happen in the short term will continue, and given that the uncertainty continues about the short term, business leaders are a little cautious. Even though they're positive, they're little still cautious.
All right, cautiously optimistic, and the uncertainty continues in the short term. But Mr. Godrej, we're at the start of a new calendar year, and by all accounts, if you gauge business confidence or you look at the expectations in terms of growth and inflation, the indication is that 2013, as of today, is likely to be a better year than the one gone by. The thought is that we have perhaps bottomed out, we've troughed out. What are your own expectations now?
No, I think the calendar year 2013 will be much better for the Indian economy than calendar year 2012 for several reasons. One is I expect the global economy will do better. Hopefully by this evening we will know about the latest on the US being able to avoid the fiscal cliff. Of course, it's in stages. Europe seems to be on the path of recovery, and the second half of 2013 should show some growth in the European economies. And China seems to be doing better and expected to better in 2013 than in 2012. I think that will clearly help India do better. And for many reasons, I expect India will do better, because we have got back on the path of reform. We have addressed the perception issues we had with things like GAR and retrospective amendments, and we have taken steps to ensure that large projects are implemented through the formation of the Cabinet Committee in this regard. So I expect 2013 will be a much better year than 2012 for the Indian economy.
Okay. Chris, 2012 has been the worst year that the Indian economy has seen in a decade. We've seen the slowest rate of growth. We're still facing those twin deficits, the fiscal deficit as well as the current account deficit. Very ugly number on the current account deficit, the highest we've seen. In that context, how optimistic or confident are you feeling about things really turning around this year? Because, look at the context. The government has got one eye on elections. It is fiscally constrained at this point in time. So what can we really then expect by way of measures to stimulate growth?
And that's the answer, right? We have to stimulate growth. And if you look at some of the positive moves taken by the government to stimulate growth, that's why I'm optimistic, because if we can sustain that and if we can continue along the same path, we will see growth come back, we will see jobs being added, and we will also see industrial activity increase, and the tax collection also would increase. So that's the sequence of events I see happening based on the messages that you get from leadership, from government, and some of the actions taken by the government in the last quarter.
Okay. Mr. Godrej, there's the big demand from the CII has been to get the GST off the ground. The 31st of December was the timeline that the finance minister had set out for the committee that he set up on GST to submit its report. We haven't heard from the government so far on that. He'd also urged you, and India Inc. to press on state governments, especially opposition, to come on board to get the GST going. Do you believe we're really likely to see a breakthrough on GST? And where have you succeeded as far as trying to talk to state governments is concerned?
I do hope so. I think a lot of work has been done both by the finance minister and at the committee level. CII has met several chief ministers. We have met the opposition. We have discussed this in detail with the finance minister too, and I think the movement on GST has been positive. And as you rightly put it, this is the single most important reform for India's growth. It is the single most important reform for India's fiscal consolidation. In fact, if we pass GST, fiscal deficits will be a thing of the past.
Well, let's see what happens as far as the GST negotiations are concerned. But Chris, let me ask you specifically from an IT sector point of view, because, you know, the IT sector has underperformed the broader markets. In terms of how the environment is likely to change in 2013, do you believe the visibility that you currently have, that you see 2013 holding more potential, more promise specifically for the IT sector?
Because the global environment seems to be better, my guess is that it should be better for the IT industry in 2013. Having said that, as I said, the near-term uncertainty would hold back investments from corporations, from companies actually. And so we have to see how this plays out. If companies become more optimistic and confident, I feel 2013 should be a better year for IT industry.
Okay, Mr. Godrej, you know, you've been demanding a rate cut and you've been fairly vocal in the fact that a rate cut should have already happened. Do you believe where we stand today, we're likely to see a rate cut as early as this month? That means January from the Reserve Bank of India. And if that were not to happen, do you believe it's going to sour sentiment significantly?
I think I'm hopeful that there will be a rate cut starting in January and there will be further rate cuts during the year. It's very clear now that inflationary expectations are low. Global commodity prices are coming down. There's a sea change in the expectation on oil and gas in the future. North America is expected to get self-sufficient in oil and gas by 2020. So inflationary expectations are low. And I think now, in fact, high rates are creating inflation because high rates are leading to lower growth. Lower growth is leading to a depreciation of the Indian rupee, which in fact is adding to inflation. So I feel it's time that lower rates will help contain inflation.
Well, let's see if the Reserve Bank does indeed cut rates. But Adi Godrej, Chris Gopalakrishnan, both of you sounding a lot more optimistic about the year ahead. Thanks very much for joining us here on CNBC TV 18 with your outlook for the new year. We appreciate your time and wish you the very best of luck. Up next on India Business Hour.